There is a book that sits on the shelves of CEOs, rap moguls, and history's quietest strategists. It is often whispered about, sometimes banned in prisons, and frequently misunderstood. It is called The 48 Laws of Power, written by Robert Greene. When most people hear the title, they recoil. They imagine a manual for sociopaths, a guide for the ruthless, or a weapon for the cruel. They recoil because they have been taught that power is dirty. They believe that to be good is to be harmless, and that to be virtuous is to be powerless. But this reaction is the first veil of illusion we must lift. To reject the study of power is not an act of holiness, it is an act of blindness. We are walking through a gallery of masks. From the office boardroom to the family dinner table, from the political arena to the quiet dynamics of a romantic relationship, power is always present. It is like gravity. It is not good or evil. It is simply the physics of human interaction. If you ignore gravity, you will fall. If you ignore the dynamics of power, you will be moved by forces you do not understand, often to your own detriment. The problem is not that people are inherently evil, it is that people are inherently unconscious. They are driven by deep ancestral needs, the need for validation, the need for security, the need to feel superior, and the fear of being invisible. Robert Greene's work is not a lesson on how to become a predator. It is a map of the human shadow. It reveals the machinery behind the mask. And if we approach this with the wisdom of the sage, rather than the hunger of the tyrant, we find something profound. We find that the people who seem to hold the most power over us are often the most enslaved by their own nature. By understanding the laws that govern them, we do not just learn how to survive, we learn how to forgive, how to detach, and how to walk through the chaos of the world with a sovereignty that cannot be shaken. Let us descend into the architecture of this world, not to become architects of pain, but to understand the building blocks of human nature. Consider the first and perhaps most famous concept: never outshine the master. On the surface, this sounds like advice for a sycophant, a call to be submissive and make yourself small so that a boss or a leader feels big. But look deeper. Why does this law exist? It exists because the master, the person in charge, is often the most fragile person in the room. We tend to look at authority figures, managers, leaders, dominant personalities, and assume they are filled with confidence. We imagine their egos are made of iron. The truth is usually the opposite. The louder the ego, the more brittle the shell. When you display your talents too brightly, when you offer the perfect solution that makes the leader look slow, or when you are more charming than the person who needs to be the center of attention, you are not just doing a good job. You are unknowingly holding a mirror up to their insecurity. You are triggering a wound in their soul that screams, "I am not enough." The reaction you get, the sudden coldness, the sabotage, the inexplicable dismissal, is not a sign of their strength. It is a defense mechanism of a frightened child hiding inside an adult's costume. The sage understands this. You do not dim your light because you are weak. You modulate your light because you are kind and because you are strategic. You allow the fragile ego of the other to remain intact so that you can continue your work without becoming a target of their envy. You are not submitting. You are handling a volatile, emotional explosive with care. This brings us to the quietest yet most deafening law. Always say less than necessary. We live in a culture of noise. We are taught, that to be heard is to exist. We over-explain, we overshare, and we fill every silence with nervous chatter. Why do we do this? We talk to explain ourselves, to seek validation, to prove we are smart, or to prove we are good. But in the realm of power, words are currency, and inflation is rampant. The more you say, the less each word is worth. When you speak endlessly about your intentions, your plans, and your feelings, you become an open book. An open book is easy to read, easy to predict, and easy to control. The unconscious actor in the game of power talks to relieve their own anxiety. They cannot bear the tension of silence. The strategist, however, befriends silence. When you say less than necessary, you create a vacuum. Human beings are natural storytellers. When they are faced with a void, they rush to fill it. If you stay silent, the other person will project their own thoughts, fears, and desires onto you. They will tell you everything you need to know, while you have given away nothing. But here is the internal shift. You must check your own shadow. Why do you feel the urge to babble? It is usually because you do not trust that you are enough just by being. You feel you must perform to earn your place. To practice silence is to practice self-sufficiency. It is the ability to stand in a room, say nothing, and feel completely whole. It is a form of power that does not require domination, only self-possession. This leads directly to the concept of concealing your intentions. In an ideal world, we would all be transparent. We would state our needs, and others would meet them. But we do not live in Eden. We live in a complex web of conflicting interests. If you announce exactly what you want before you are ready to claim it, you arm your opposition. You give the unconscious saboteurs around you the exact blueprint of how to block you. This is not about being a liar. It is about being a diplomat of your own soul. The world does not need to know every movement of your heart. When you are working on a new project, a new transformation, or a new path in life, keep it shrouded in the mist for as long as possible. A seed needs darkness to germinate. If you pull it out into the sunlight too early, it dies. By keeping your intentions guarded, you protect your potential from the skepticism and envy of those who have abandoned their own dreams. You appear harmless and agreeable, blending in like water until the moment your momentum is too strong to be stopped. Now, consider the law that cuts through the noise of modern conflict. Win through your actions, never through argument. How many hours of your life have you wasted trying to convince someone they are wrong? How much energy have you poured into debates where the other person was not listening to logic, but simply defending their identity? When we argue, we are rarely fighting for truth. We are fighting for the survival of our ego. We want to be right because being wrong feels like a death. The person you are arguing with feels the exact same way. That is why arguments spiral. They are collisions of two desperate identities. The strategist realizes that words are wind. They convince no one. Demonstration, however, is undeniable. If you are competent, do not say it, show it. If you are right, let the results speak. When you stop arguing, you step out of the ring. You preserve your energy. You stop feeding the other person's resistance. And often, when you stop pushing, the other person stops pushing back. They are left fighting the air while you have already moved on to the solution. This is not surrender. It is the ultimate efficiency. There is a darker law that we must address with great care. Infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. This sounds cruel. It sounds like a rejection of compassion. But we must look at this through the lens of emotional contagion. We all know people who seem to be perpetually surrounded by drama. Chaos follows them like a storm cloud. They are always the victim, always misunderstood, always in a crisis. Initially, our heart goes out to them. We want to save them. This is the savior complex, living in our own shadow. We think if we can fix them, we will prove our own worth. But Robert Greene warns us that some misfortunes are self-created. They are the result of destructive patterns, lack of self-awareness, and toxic behaviors that the individual refuses to change. Emotional states are as infectious as diseases. If you tie your ship to a sinking vessel, you will not keep it afloat. You will simply drown with it. The sage knows the difference between a person struck by tragedy who needs a helping hand and a person who is addicted to chaos. The former seeks healing, the latter seeks an audience. To protect your own sanity, you must recognize when someone is drowning in their own patterns and refuses to swim. You must love them from a distance. You cannot save everyone, and if you lose your own stability, you can save no one. Then there is the law of interaction. Appeal to self-interest, never to mercy or gratitude. This is perhaps the most cynical-sounding principle, but it is actually the most pragmatic. When we need help, our instinct is to plead. We remind people of what we have done for them in the past. We talk about fairness. We talk about our needs. But people are locked in their own skulls, obsessed with their own survival and advancement. When you talk about your needs, they hear noise. When you talk about their interests, they hear music. If you need an ally, do not ask for a favor. Show them how helping you will benefit them. Show them the profit, the prestige, or the ease it will bring to their lives. This is not manipulation, it is translation. You are translating your needs into their language. And why do we hate this law? We hate it because we want to believe the world is a family where everyone takes care of everyone. We are disappointed when people are transactional. But this disappointment comes from our own projection. We project our ideal of a mother or father onto our boss, our partners, or our society. We want to be taken care of. The strategist accepts that adult relationships are based on mutual exchange. By accepting this, you stop being a beggar and become a trader. You gain dignity. Finally, we must touch upon the ultimate defense. Assume formlessness. In a world that is constantly changing, rigidity is death. The oak tree stands rigid and breaks in the storm. The bamboo bends and survives. To be formless is to let go of the heavy armor of your identity. It is the ability to adapt, to change your mind, to move with the times, and to let go of old grudges. The person who says, "This is just who I am," is announcing their own obsolescence. They are a fixed target. But formlessness is terrifying to the ego. The ego wants a label. It wants to be the strong one, the smart one, the victim, or the rebel. To be formless means you are none of these things permanently. You are a fluid consciousness responding to the moment. When you are attacked, you flow around the blow. When you are blocked, you find a new path like water. You do not defend a fortress, you become the wind. Now, we must turn the camera around. We must pivot from the external world to the internal one. Why does the subject of power make you uncomfortable? Why, perhaps, did you feel a twinge of judgment when I spoke of appealing to self-interest or concealing intentions? It is often because we have split the world into good and bad. We have decided that to be good is to be harmless, transparent, and self-sacrificing. We look at the manipulators and the users with disdain, but Jung would ask us to look closer. We often hate in others what we have repressed in ourselves. The person who prides themselves on being brutally honest often secretly envies the charm and social grace of the courtier. The person who gives everything to others and asks for nothing often secretly craves control and power, but seeks it through the covert contract of martyrdom. They think, I suffered for you, so now you owe me. That is a power move, just a very inefficient and painful one. The manipulators you fear, the narcissists, the Machiavellians, they are not monsters under the bed. They are people who are utterly enslaved by their need for supply. They control you because they cannot control themselves. They seek dominion over others because they have no dominion over their own darkness. When you see them this way, the fear evaporates and is replaced by a cool, detached pity. You realize that their armor is actually a prison, and you realize that you have the capacity for all of it too. You have the capacity to be cruel, to be deceptive, to be selfish. Acknowledging this does not make you bad, it makes you whole. A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a dangerous man who has that danger under voluntary control. When you integrate these laws, you stop being a leaf blowing in the wind. You stop being the victim of other people's games because you can see the board. You recognize the boundary test when someone insults you slightly to see if you will react. Instead of getting angry, you see it for what it is, a probe, and you respond with silence or a smile that says, I see you. You recognize the love bombing not as true affection, but as a seduction tactic, and you maintain your footing. This brings us to the conclusion, the open garden. The goal of studying the 48 laws of power is not to build a fortress where no one can hurt you. That is a lonely way to live. That is the path of the paranoid king who eats alone for fear of poison. The goal is to build a gate. When you do not understand power, you have no gate. Anyone can walk into your mind, your emotions, and your life. You are defenseless against the charismatic salesman, the toxic partner, or the tyrannical boss. You are forced to trust everyone, which means you can truly trust no one, because you cannot distinguish the wolf from the sheep. But when you understand these laws, you build a gate with a strong lock. You become the sovereign of your own domain. You can look at the world with clear eyes. You can see the games, the masks, and the daggers hidden in smiles. And because you can see them, you are not afraid of them. This allows you to practice selective trust. You do not have to trust blindly. You verify. You watch actions, not words. You test character over time. And when you find those rare individuals who do not play games, those who are authentic, kind, and conscious, you can let them in. You can lower the bridge. You learn to use these laws not to enslave others, but to free yourself. You use always say less than necessary to listen more deeply to your loved ones. You use appeal to self-interest to help your community thrive by aligning goals. You use formlessness to grow and evolve as a human being. Robert Greene teaches us the mechanics of the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. But it is up to us, the alchemists of our own souls, to take that leaden reality and transmute it into gold. Do not fear the game. Learn the rules so that you may play it beautifully, or if you choose, walk away from it entirely, not out of weakness, but out of a strength that no longer needs to prove itself. Walk through the gallery of masks, but do not forget who you are beneath your own. The masquerade is happening whether you join it or not. The only choice you have is whether you dance with your eyes open or with your eyes closed. Open your eyes.